Hello everyone, Neuronar here, and today, as promised in my previous video, we're going to get right to it and I'm going to show you 12 different power inverters in my collection and talk a little bit about each one. And for those of you who may be in the market to purchase a 12 volt to 120 volt power inverter, this might be of interest to you. So let's get started, and the first unit up is a 400 watt modified sine wave unit from Chicago Electric. This is a handy little portable inverter made by Chicago Electric. It is 400 watts. This is a convenient size for in your car, for example, but I do want to mention that you will only get about 150 watts out of a cigarette lighter adapter in a vehicle, and that is a limitation of your cigarette lighter plug, not the inverter, so that'll be true of anything that you buy. So it does have these screw terminals for cables that can be connected directly up to a battery, or special wiring in your vehicle, either way. It has a cooling fan that is load controlled, so it turns on when there is any load at all, and it is quite noisy. That may be a detractor to some of you, and it shuts off under no load. This inverter does have a rather impressive no load current draw from the battery of about 100 milliamps, so you can leave this running for a long time and not have your battery drained. That's a nice feature of it. It has a handy little on-off button that you can push. 2 outlets on it. These are just connected up in parallel, so you don't get any more power having to. It just allows you to avoid a splitter or extension cord power strip. It also has a 5 volt USB plug, which is handy for charging phones and whatnot. It says 400 watts in the front, but I have tested this particular inverter, and it actually does 450 watts. The surge capability is very limited, but for a 400 watt inverter that's typically not a problem since you're not running high surge loads off of it. It's things like laptops and lights and whatnot. But it'll actually do 450 watts for quite a long time. I think I had it running for 20 minutes or so. So I'm rather impressed with this inverter for that. The efficiency of it is pretty low, but that's typical of small inverters like this. I bought this inverter as part of a package deal along with another one. Both this one and the other inverter were broken, so I knew that I would have to repair them. But this inverter did come with the retail box, the user manual, and a set of cables to connect it up to a battery. Now, to be honest, I was most excited about these cables because this is just a cheap inverter. You can buy one for 25-30 bucks in pretty much any store, and it's really hardly worth fixing. However, I did open it up and I did end up fixing it. Let's take a quick look at the box here. Chicago Electric, 400 watt continuous, 800 watt peak. As I've mentioned before, 800 watt peak is a complete lie. Ignore it. It's a 400 watt inverter, or 450 as I tested it to be. Modified sine for up to 85% efficiency. Ooh, 85%. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Flip the box over. LED indicator light, because that's so important to mention on the box. 23.6 inch heavy duty cables with alligator clips, because you really need that extra 0.6 inches. Here's those heavy duty cables they were talking about. Look at that, so heavy duty. Can barely squeeze this open. Anyway, let's see who they're made by. Kunshan Electric. Yeah, I bet these will be flexible in the cold. Anyway, cheap cables, cheap inverter, but for what you pay, I think it's a pretty decent deal. Alright, so as I mentioned, I bought this thing broken, and I fixed it. You may be wondering what was wrong with it. Well, the box here says, look at that, short circuit protected. Well, short circuit protected means it blows a fuse. Actually did open it up, and I found that it had 2 25 amp fuses in it, and that was the only problem with it. So I just shorted across those fuses with a piece of wire. I certainly can't resell it that way because it could be a fire hazard, but I'm pretty sure that something inside will fuse open before anything actually burns up. And I thought it was kind of funny. If we take a look at the user manual in here, they have maintenance, etc. They actually tell you how to replace the fuses. Is anybody really going to open this thing up and try to replace fuses? It's actually takes a fair amount of work to open. And the funny part is they show you where the fuses are and everything in here, except the fuses are actually soldered to the printed circuit board. There's no fuse holders. So even if you went through all the effort to get this far, open it up, find the fuses, buy new fuses for it, which would probably cost you almost as much as buying a new inverter anyway, you'd find that these are soldered in and you can't even remove them. So there it is, inverter number 1, 400 watts. Now let's move up to something just a little bit larger. Inverter number 2 is the Xantrex ProWatt 600 watt inverter. Now I had done an entire video review of this earlier, so if you're interested in the details, go ahead and check out that video. But I'm just going to quickly summarize. This is advertised as 600 watts. In reality, I tested and it does about 700 watts continuously without overheating at room temperature. So that's pretty good for a 600 watt inverter. It is modified sine wave. But at 600 watts it'll power some appliances that you might think a 600 watt inverter shouldn't be able to power. For example, my full-size refrigerator. And that's because this one does have about 1100 watts of surge capability. And that's actually really capable of 1100 watts. Unlike many of them that advertise surge, this one actually has it. It also has a fairly low, no-load power draw of about 1/4 amp, I believe, if I remember correctly. The fan on it does run continuously, which is potentially a negative for some people. The fan will suck in dirt and dust and everything, and potentially cause the inverter to corrode earlier than it otherwise might. And it also makes a fair amount of noise. The efficiency of this is fairly low. It's around 85% peak. Like most of the inverters in this power range below 1000 watts, they typically aren't very efficient. So that's pretty typical. I won't call that a negative. The fan on this inverter is kind of an odd size, so I had to be a little bit creative in the fan that I put in it. I did end up replacing it with a quieter fan. The one that was in there was fairly loud, and the fan in this unit runs all the time regardless of whether there's a load or not, so that gets kind of annoying. The fan that I put in here is quieter and it takes less power. So this is the Xantrex ProWatt 600 watt inverter. I'd recommend it. Inverter number 3. Alright, now we're stepping up into quadruple digits. Chicago Electric 1000 watt power inverter. Now, first thing to mention, 1000 watts / 2000 watts. As always, ignore 2000 watts. None of the cheap inverters will ever do any sort of surge. This is a 1000 watt inverter. Let's see what else they say about it. High converting efficiency. Well, there's a bad sign. Already they have poor language on here. You can be sure that it's the same as any other one, if not worse. They all claim to be highly efficient. Latest soft start technique. All this means is that the voltage sags when you put it under a heavy load. I hardly call that a feature, but I guess if you could pass it off as a feature to the consumer. 3 3-pronged grounding outlets. Well, yeah, they're not grounded unless you pound a stake into the ground or something, so that's kind of meaningless too. Let's flip the box over, see what else they say about it. Output power, surge power, AC voltage 120, output voltage plus or minus 10%, that's all fine for a cheap inverter. The input and output, or the input voltage range here is worth mentioning. They have shutdown at 10 volts. It's pretty important to have this down to around 10.5 or 10 volts, otherwise when you load an automotive battery, the battery voltage sags quite a bit just because it has an internal resistance. There's also other chemical factors going on in there, but you want to make sure that this is plenty low once you get into the 1000 watt range, otherwise you will not be able to get the full power out of your inverter. And efficiency 90%, I'm sure it's not quite that good. So let's see what they say about the usage method. Place the power switches of the inverter and the AC device on the off position. Connect properly to DC 12 volt power. Plug the cord of the AC device in the output socket of the inverter. Step 4. Turning the switch of the inverter on, then that of the AC device. This AC device can be used now as under the common power supply. Well, you can be sure that this is all Asian design here. And nobody even proofread this crap. Always a bad sign. Anyway, let's open up the box and take a look at it. Alright, let's see what this thing looks like. Open up the box. Looks like it's packaged reasonably well. And there's the inverter. So I actually did buy this one broken, and I repaired this inverter, and I had a pretty common problem that a lot of these inverters have. It looked like somebody had plugged this into an AC outlet that was active, the output into an AC outlet that was active, and it blew up the output stage. So it was a fairly easy fix if you have the parts for it. But otherwise it's a pretty standard construction inverter. On-off switch, 3 outlets in parallel, two fans on it. I forget if these run continuously or not. A couple screw terminals to hook up to your battery, a grounding lug here, grating for airflow, etc. So there isn't a whole lot to mention here, but I will show you what was wrong with it. I also think that this is kind of funny. It will bring you more convenience by supplying you with AC power converted from DC power source whenever and wherever you are. Sure, as long as you want to carry one of these around everywhere you go. Wherever you are, my butt. So this is a close-up of the inside of one of these power inverters. They're pretty much all designed pretty much the same. Usually it's an Asian design company, you can tell, that just blatantly copied somebody else's design, since almost everybody's are identical unless you get the higher end ones. But in any case, what was wrong with that inverter is if you slip off these little sleeves on these transistors, there is a bridge, one here, one here, one here, and one here, bank of transistors. And these transistors here are often fried if someone plugs the output outlets directly up to a live power source. And that's what looks like it happened to this inverter over here. So I just replaced those transistors, and it worked just fine after that. So that is the Chicago Electric 1000 watt power inverter. To be honest, I don't know a whole lot about it. I just repaired it and stuck it back in the box. But here it is. I would not recommend this inverter. If you get it cheap enough, sure, but otherwise no. Inverter number 4 is the Chicago Electric 1200 watt power inverter. Now this box looks almost identical to the last one, so there isn't a whole lot to mention about it. But I do want to just mention a couple things. One of them is the fuse rating. They actually give you the fuses that it has. 40 amps times 5. 40 amps times 5 is 200 amps. And basically that gives you a good indication that it does have a surge capability, because it would only take about 150 amps worth of fuses to get your 1200 watts. So that's a good sign. And to be honest, I didn't actually test the surge capability of this. This is another one that I just repaired and stuck back in the box. So I can't talk a whole lot about that. However, there is one more thing I want to mention. Take a look at this. Output power 1200 watts, alright, that's fine. Surge power 2400 watts. Well, take a look at this. Here's the 1200 watt inverter out of the box. And let's see, 1200 watts continuous, 2400, wait a minute, 3200 watts peak? I thought the box said 2400. Yeah, well, the box doesn't even match the product that's inside. Isn't that a good sign? This, once again, is a very cheap power inverter, and they couldn't even get the ratings correct on the box, apparently. I guarantee you, though, it's not 3200 watts. This just goes to show that they can put whatever they want for the peak power draw, and it means absolutely nothing. So, please ignore it. But this is the 1200 watt, and this is the 1000 watt unit. You can see that it is just a little bit larger and a little bit more capable. So that's about all I have to say about this one. It's pretty much identical to the other one otherwise. This one does have two fans on this side, one fan on this side. It's kind of a waste to have a push-pull configuration, but that's how they decided to design it for some unknown reason. If you're going to get one of these two inverters, I would recommend the 1200 watt one. Inverter number 5 is yet another Chicago Electric power inverter. This time we have a 1500 watt. We did 1000, 1200, and now 1500 watts. This one is quite a bit more capable than the other ones. We're starting to get up into the range where you could comfortably power a few power tools off of it. However, I don't think we're quite there yet. This box is pretty beat up, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time taking a look at it. But I do want to mention a couple things on this box as well. We have yet more signs that the quality of this product is probably not very good. Triple fans for maximum cooling reduces overheating to increase maximum power usage time. Yeah, can't they get anybody to proofread this crap? I mean, they're trying to sell this product in the United States. Can't they at least get an English speaker to write the advertising on their boxes? Seriously, people. And how about this sneaky little disclaimer they put on the box? Because of continuing improvements, actual product may differ slightly from photo. Well, yeah, that just means they can put whatever crap they want in the box. Alright, well, enough of the box. So let's take a look at the actual inverter. But this is where I run into a problem, because here's the guts of the inverter. Here's the bottom of the case and the top of the case with some other miscellaneous pieces. I have a bunch of screws and other parts that aren't included here in this camera shot, but this inverter was one of my failures. I purchased this one broken, just like many of the others, and this one I failed to repair. With a lot of effort I may have been able to, but it really wasn't worth it. So instead I just stole some of the components off of it and used those components to repair a much higher value inverter instead. And repairing these inverters is not always very straightforward or simple. Take for example this inverter. This happens to be an Ames 3000 watt power inverter that I tried to repair and failed to do so. I think I probably could if I spent a lot more time on it, but I'm kind of worn out. I already spent quite a bit of time on it, but I mean, look at all this crap that's inside this thing, right? Here, and there's more stuff in the bottom of the box, more pieces, a bunch of heat sinks, a bunch of screws that I'm not even showing you. And this one actually has a trouble with some of the driver circuitry, which is not really a standard component, so I would have to design my own, and it just isn't very practical. So I have a box full of spare parts here, as well as the spare parts that I just showed you from that 1500 watt inverter. If you're thinking of repairing these inverters to make money, it is not a money-making venture, it's just a hobby. So there's the Chicago Electric 1500 watt power inverter, and there isn't a whole lot to say about it because I don't have a working inverter to show you, but instead of buying that, I would recommend buying something like this instead. This is a Xantrex X-Power 1500 watt inverter. X-Power is their lowest end inverters, I believe, that they offer, but it is just a cheap modified sine wave inverter. However, this one does have some surge capability, a very small amount, but at least a little bit. And also, it has a higher efficiency, it is quieter, and it has a significantly lower no-load power draw. And this particular inverter here, I actually bought working. What do you know? I know most things I buy are broken and I fix them, but it did come with cables, which was actually quite a bit of value if you find an inverter that comes with cables, because cabling is not cheap. I think this one cost me $50 after shipping with the cables, so pretty decent deal that way. And this is a nice little inverter. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. It has load and temperature controlled fans, a couple outlets. It's just a pretty standard inverter. It's not the highest quality, but it works pretty well, and I'm happy with it. So I would recommend this one instead of the cheaper Chicago Electric brand. One thing I don't like about this one is that you probably can't see it in camera without me taking the back cover off, but the circuit board inside is not coated. It is bare. So this is not something that you would want to put in a vehicle or on a boat. The Chicago Electric inverters, they do come coated. So that is one minor benefit of them, but if you have it in a benign environment, I would recommend this one instead. Here's the user manual for the Xantrex X-Power 1500 watt inverter. It's pretty lengthy, it's pretty thick, and it's 100% in English, which for me is nice because I'm an English speaker. I like it when they actually spend the money to print different languages of different manuals instead of including the exact same manual in every box. It's always kind of annoying. But they do a lot of things in here that a lot of the lesser inverters don't give you. They give you a bunch of wiring diagrams for different ways to hook things up. They describe to you that one battery probably isn't going to get you 1500 watts. You need to have two in parallel in order to do that. Most inverters neglect to mention that to you, yet it's quite important. They cover different battery types, etc., give you all the dimensions. So it's a pretty complete manual, and that's a good sign for a product. They also don't have grammatical errors all over the place. But one thing I do want to say is about the input voltage range. Input voltage 10.5 to 15, and I did test this. It does shut off at about 10.5 volts, which is fine, but as far as the high side goes, it shuts off with an overvoltage condition at 15 volts. Now, the designers here, I mean Xantrex, they're a pretty reputable company, but do these people even know how vehicles work? I mean, seriously, 15 volts and it shuts off? Car alternators go up to almost 16 volts when it's cold outside. And I believe this company is based in Canada, so they should know what cold weather is. But 15 volts just doesn't cut it. I've seen about 15.4 volts in one of my vehicles when it's cold, and it's quite common to be over 15 volts, especially for sealed lead calcium batteries. They require a higher voltage than the older lead antimony style. And the This basically means that if you want to put this into a vehicle, you need to be careful. A lot of vehicles will have a voltage greater than 15 and your inverter will shut off. So that is something to watch for. But aside from that little foible, this is a pretty good inverter. I would recommend this one. In this video I've covered 6 different power inverters from 400 watts to 1500 watts. And all of these I would consider to be casual type inverters. Something you might take on occasion to go camping, or maybe even for use during a power outage to run some lights, a fan, or possibly even your refrigerator. But we still have 6 more inverters to go, and next time we're going to keep cranking up that power dial, and I will show you 6 more 12 volt to 120 volt power inverters. So if you like this kind of video, thumb me up or down, and thanks for watching.